In the war's early years, U-boat commanders operated with comfortable safety margins. Standard procedure called for maintaining 4 lookouts on the bridge during surface operations, each one scanning a specific sector of sky and sea. On a clear day, experienced lookouts could spot incoming aircraft at 8 to 10 miles distance, giving 3 to 4 minutes of warning time. Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartenstein, commanding U-156, demonstrated throughout 1942 just how effective these procedures could be. Operating in the South Atlantic, Hartenstein's lookouts successfully detected and evaded dozens of aircraft patrols. His war diary from September 1942 records a typical encounter. At 14:25 hours, aircraft spotted bearing 045 degrees, distance approximately 8 miles, alarm sounded, crash dive initiated, first depth charges exploding 90 seconds after the boat submerged, well clear of the vessel. 90 seconds of margin after going under. This comfortable buffer allowed the entire bridge watch to clear the tower, the diesel engines to shut down properly, and the boat to reach safe depth before any weapons arrived overhead. The numbers from this period confirm German confidence. Between February and October 1942, U-boats transiting the Bay of Biscay completed 80% of their passages without being attacked at all. Even when caught on the surface, 90% successfully crash-dived to safety before weapons were released. The introduction of ASV Mark II radar in early 1942 initially seemed manageable. The 1.7-meter wavelength radar could detect a surface submarine at 10 to 15 miles, but the emissions were easily picked up by the German Metox receiver. Radio operators could tell from the pulse pattern when aircraft had locked onto them, as the pulses would become steady instead of sweeping. This usually provided 2 to 3 minutes before the aircraft actually arrived overhead. Squadron leader Humphrey de Verde Ley understood the fundamental problem with night attacks on submarines. Radar could track them to within a mile, but then contact was lost precisely when visual identification became necessary. The submarine would hear the aircraft engines, execute a crash dive, and escape in the darkness. Lee's solution was elegantly simple. Mount a 22 million candela searchlight that would illuminate the target at the exact moment radar contact was lost. The first operational Lee light attack occurred on June 4, 1942, when Squadron Leader Greswell, flying a Wellington from 172 Squadron, illuminated the Italian submarine Luigi Torelli in the Bay of Biscay. Though the attack failed due to faulty depth charges, the psychological impact was immediate and profound. Darkness no longer guaranteed safety. The first successful Lee light attack came 1 month later. On July 5, 1942, Pilot Officer Howell of 502 Squadron caught U-502 on the surface. Captain Lieutenant Jürgen von Rosenstiel, the submarine's commander, had less than 20 seconds from the moment of illumination to impact. When U-502 was sunk 6 days later, recovered documents confirmed the crew's shock at being attacked without any warning at night. The Lee light compressed reaction time dramatically. A Wellington approaching at 120 miles per hour covered the 1-mile gap between radar failure and weapon release in just 30 seconds. Subtract the time needed for crew reaction and dive initiation, and submarines had perhaps 15 to 20 seconds to get underwater, which was insufficient to reach safe depth. By early 1943, Operation Derange deployed 131 aircraft equipped with ley lights in coordinated patrols across the Bay of Biscay. Admiral Dönitz responded by reversing standard operating procedures, ordering boats to remain surfaced during daylight and submerge at night. But this merely shifted the vulnerability without eliminating it. March 1943 marked the beginning of the end for effective U-boat operations. The introduction of ASV Mark III radar, operating at 10 centimeter wavelength using cavity magnetron technology, was completely undetectable by German Metox equipment. U-boat crews began reporting attacks without any radar warning whatsoever, something German scientists insisted was impossible, as they believed no radar could operate at such frequencies. U-333 became one of the first victims on March 6, 1943, while crossing the Bay of Biscay. Captain Lieutenant Peter Kremer's official report sent shockwaves through U-boat headquarters. No METOX warning, aircraft appeared directly overhead without detection, crash dive initiated under fire, severe casualties from strafing. Within weeks, similar reports flooded in from across the Atlantic. U-boats were being caught on the surface in broad daylight, at night, in fog, under conditions where they should have been completely invisible. The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. A B-24 Liberator equipped with ASV Mark III could detect a submarine at 15 miles and attack at 200 miles per hour. From first detection to weapon release took less than 5 minutes. Without warning, the submarine might have 5 seconds from visual sighting to impact, which was insufficient even to sound the diving alarm. The psychological impact on crews was devastating. Men who had relied on their detection equipment for survival suddenly found themselves blind. Trust in technology evaporated overnight, replaced by paranoia and fear. Some boats began diving at random intervals, hoping to avoid being caught on the surface. By May 1943, the Bay of Biscay had transformed from a transit route into what U-boat crews called the Valley of Death. Submarines leaving French bases faced a gauntlet of aircraft equipped with centimetric radar, lee lights, and new weapons. In April and May 1943, 56 U-boats were lost in just 2 months, many within sight of their home ports. The compression of warning time had tactical implications beyond individual survival. U-boats consumed battery power at unsustainable rates, forced to crash dive repeatedly without time to properly recharge. A Type 7 submarine could maintain 7.3 knots submerged for just 1 hour before exhausting its batteries. Forced to surface to recharge, they immediately came under attack again, creating a vicious cycle. The introduction of the Mark 24 Fido acoustic homing torpedo added another lethal dimension. Dropped from as low as 200 feet at speeds up to 120 knots, this 680-pound weapon achieved a 22% success rate compared to 9% for conventional depth charges. Once in the water, the Fido executed circular search patterns, homing on the 24 kHz acoustic signature of submarine propellers. Between May 1943 and the war's end, these weapons sank 37 submarines and damaged 18 more, often attacking boats that had successfully crash-dived beyond conventional weapon range. German attempts to restore the technological balance consistently arrived too late. The Naxos radar detector, introduced in September 1943, could detect centimetric radar, but only at ranges of 5 to 8 kilometers, insufficient warning when aircraft approached at 300 kilometers per hour. The device's delicate construction frequently failed in combat conditions. The Schnorkel, adopted from captured Dutch designs and deployed operationally in early 1944, offered a partial solution by allowing submarines to run diesel engines while submerged. But this innovation came with severe limitations. Speed was reduced to 6 knots, the diesel exhaust created a visible plume, and the noise of engines running in the confined Schnorkel tube made acoustic detection of approaching aircraft impossible. Donitz's desperate order of April 27, 1943, for U-boats to fight it out with aircraft on the surface rather than dive proved disastrous. Selected Type 7 submarines were converted into flak boats with enhanced anti-aircraft armament. U-441's experience on July 12, 1943, demonstrated the utter futility of this approach when coordinated attacks by multiple aircraft overwhelmed submarine defences despite enhanced armament. Initially, U-boat crews refused to accept that their technological advantage had vanished. When U-333 reported being attacked without radar warning in March 1943, other commanders dismissed it as equipment failure or crew error. The German scientific establishment insisted that radar couldn't operate at wavelengths shorter than 50 centimeters. Admiral Dönitz himself initially rejected reports of undetectable radar. His war diary from April 1943 reveals skepticism about crew reports and a dangerous dismissal of mounting evidence. This denial proved extremely costly. Commanders who should have adapted their tactics continued operating as if METOX provided adequate warning. U-175, U-192, and U-273 were all lost in April 1943, while their crews maintained confidence in their radar detection equipment, never knowing they were broadcasting their positions to enemy aircraft they couldn't detect. As losses mounted through the spring, desperate measures emerged. The order to fight aircraft on the surface represented a fundamental break with submarine doctrine that had been refined over decades. U-441's conversion to an anti-aircraft configuration added multiple 20mm cannons, but the July 12th attack demonstrated the futility when 3 Beaufighters overwhelmed the submarine's defences in seconds, leaving 10 dead and 13 wounded before anyone could properly return fire. By autumn 1943, even the most optimistic commanders accepted that the technological battle was lost. The introduction of American escort carriers meant continuous air patrols even in the mid-Atlantic, eliminating the safe zones where submarines had previously operated with relative impunity. Captain Lieutenant Wolfgang Luth, one of Germany's most successful U-boat commanders with over 200,000 tons of shipping sunk to his credit, addressed the new reality in his final patrol report with stark honesty. "The enemy can see us when we cannot see him. He can attack without warning. Our survival now depends not on equipment, but on luck alone." The psychological shift was complete and irreversible. U-boat crews that had once sung confidently about hunting in the Atlantic now referred to their submarines as iron coffins. By 1944, the statistical life expectancy for a U-boat crewman was 3 patrols. Of the 40,000 men who served in U-boats during the war, 28,000 would die at sea, a 70% casualty rate that was the highest of any service in any nation during World War II. A Type 7 U-boat crash dive was a precisely choreographed emergency maneuver that required split-second timing and flawless execution. The sequence began with the bridge watch spotting danger and initiating the alarm. The electric klaxon sent every crew member racing to diving stations they had rehearsed hundreds of times. The bridge watch had to clear the conning tower in less than 12 seconds, sliding down the ladder in a specific order that had been drilled into them. Control room operators opened main ballast tank vents while simultaneously flooding the negative tank, a 70-ton auxiliary tank positioned forward. The bow planes went to maximum down angle, 30 degrees, while all available men ran forward to add their weight to the bow, helping force the submarine down faster. The entire evolution required split-second timing that left no room for error. Too steep an angle and battery acid would spill, creating deadly chlorine gas that could kill everyone aboard. Too shallow and depth charges would destroy them before they reached safe depth. American patrol aircraft exploited every vulnerability in this process with ruthless efficiency. The ASV Mark III radar operated at 9.1 GHz frequency with a wavelength of 3.2 centimeters, completely invisible to German detection equipment. The radar could detect a surfaced submarine at 15 miles in calm seas, giving aircraft plenty of time to set up their attack run. The Lee light produced 50 million candle power, automatically triggered when radar range decreased to 1 mile, illuminating the target at the precise moment visual identification was needed. This combination gave submarines less than 25 seconds from illumination to impact, and often much less. The attack on U-758 on June 8, 1943, demonstrated the new reality of submarine warfare. After reporting convoy GUS-7's position south of the Azores, the submarine came under sustained attack from USS Bogue's air group. The submarine remained on the surface for over 30 minutes under continuous attack, with crew members manning anti-aircraft guns while others prepared for emergency dive. Only when overwhelming force arrived did U-758 successfully crash dive, but 7 wounded crew members forced the boat's immediate return to base, the patrol a complete failure. On October 20th, 1943, U-256 came under attack from aircraft launched from USS Block Island. After an unsuccessful crash dive attempt, Captain Lieutenant Wilhelm Brauel was killed and several crew members wounded. The submarine's war diary recorded the crew's shock at being caught without warning despite functioning detection equipment, a refrain that appeared in report after report throughout 1943. The mutual destruction of U-571 and an Australian Sunderland on January 28, 1944, illustrated the compressed time frame both sides now operated within. Flight Lieutenant Lucas detected U-571 on radar at 12 miles distance, achieving complete surprise by approaching through cloud cover. He emerged at just 800 yards distance, giving U-571 exactly 18 seconds before weapon release. As the submarine's conning tower disappeared beneath the waves, the Sunderland's port wing struck the submarine's jumping wire. Both vessels were lost with heavy casualties, 52 men from U-571 and 11 from the Sunderland's crew, a tragic testament to how compressed the margins had become. The decisive moment came during what U-boat crews would remember as Black May 1943, when the submarine force lost 41 boats in a single month. The battle around convoy ONS-5 demonstrated the complete impossibility of successful operations under the new conditions. 17 U-boats attacked the convoy between May 4th and 6th with everything they had. 6 were sunk, 11 were damaged, and not a single merchant ship was lost. The statistics from this battle revealed a complete reversal of fortune. Average warning time before air attack was 8 seconds, percentage of successful crash dives when attacked was 31%, and the number of U-boats able to execute successful torpedo attacks was 0. Admiral Dönitz's diary entry for May 24, 1943, conceded defeat in terms that acknowledged the technological reality. The enemy's new location devices and weapons have torn our sole offensive weapon from our hands. The submarine war must be withdrawn until new weapons restore the balance. That balance would never be restored. U-boat operations after May 1943 became exercises in survival rather than offensive action. Submarines remained submerged for up to 20 hours daily, surfacing only briefly to ventilate the boat and charge batteries. Even these brief surface periods invited immediate attack from aircraft that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The introduction of the schnorkel in 1944 eliminated the need for full surface operations, but created new vulnerabilities that crews quickly learned to hate. The device required precise depth control that was exhausting to maintain. Too deep and the valve closed, creating a vacuum inside the boat that could burst eardrums and cause excruciating pain. Too shallow, and the schnorkel head created a visible wake detectable from miles away by sharp-eyed lookouts. The noise of diesel engines running in the confined space made it impossible to hear approaching threats, leaving crews deaf to danger. Statistics from 1944 reveal the completely transformed nature of submarine operations. Average time on the surface per day dropped to 45 minutes, down from 16 hours in 1942. Average patrol speed fell to 4 knots, down from 10. Most telling of all, merchant ships sunk per U-boat lost dropped to 0.7, down from 12.6 in 1942. The compression of the crash dive window had strategic implications that extended far beyond individual losses. U-boats could no longer coordinate wolfpack attacks that had been their primary tactical advantage. Commerce raiding became impossible when submarines spent most of their time submerged at minimal speed, unable to intercept convoys or maneuver into attack position. The Battle of the Atlantic's outcome was decided in laboratories and factories as much as on the ocean itself. British scientists who developed centimetric radar, American workers who built thousands of patrol aircraft, Allied intelligence officers who broke German codes collectively eliminated the U-boat's escape window. Their victory was methodical rather than dramatic, technological rather than heroic, but utterly decisive. American patrol squadrons evolved from amateur submarine hunters to efficient killers through systematic training and technological advancement that left nothing to chance. At Naval Air Station Jacksonville, crews practiced attacks on actual submarines that had been captured or borrowed for training purposes. Mock attacks were filmed and critiqued frame by frame. Crews taking more than 35 seconds from sighting to weapon release failed the exercise and repeated it until they got it right. By late 1943, American aircraft achieved one U-boat kill for every 40 attack sorties, compared to 1 per 200 sorties in 1942, a five-fold improvement in efficiency. The introduction of escort carriers brought aircraft to the mid-ocean gap where submarines had previously operated safely beyond land-based aircraft range. USS Bogues Air Group alone sank 13 U-boats in 2 years of operations. These small carriers proved that air power could be projected anywhere in the Atlantic, eliminating the last safe havens. Lieutenant Commander Robert Hopgood, who helped establish American anti-submarine doctrine from the ground up, described the evolution in terms that captured the relentless focus on speed. We learned to think in seconds rather than minutes. Every procedure was refined to shave time from the attack sequence. We knew the Germans needed at least 20 seconds to crash dive successfully, and our job was to deny them those seconds. VPB-110 became the first American squadron to employ Lee lights on January 10, 1945, and they perfected the false engine technique of throttling back during approach to create the illusion of distance, then suddenly increasing power for the final attack run. This psychological warfare proved effective against already traumatized U-boat crews who had learned to fear the night as much as the day. Ultra-intelligence from Enigma decryption fundamentally altered U-boat survival mathematics in ways that crews never fully understood. The initial breakthrough in reading the Dolphin cipher in June 1941 was temporarily lost when the four-rotor Shark cipher was introduced in February 1942, creating a terrifying blackout period for Allied intelligence. However, in October 1942, Lieutenant Francis Fasson and able seaman Colin Grazier from HMS Petard boarded the sinking U-559 to recover codebooks and cipher materials. Both men drowned when the submarine suddenly sank beneath them, but their sacrifice restored Allied code-breaking capability by December 1942, giving the Allies an intelligence advantage that would never again be lost. The statistics reveal Ultra's devastating impact on U-boat operations. 73% of U-boats were intercepted while transiting to patrol areas when Ultra intelligence was available, versus 21% without. Average time from a U-boat's position report to air attack dropped to 4 hours when intelligence was being read. 67% of convoys were successfully routed around wolf packs before contact could be made. This intelligence advantage meant that even perfect crash dives only postponed the inevitable. Submarines forced to surface hours later to recharge batteries were simply attacked again and again until they were destroyed or forced to abort their patrol. The numbers tell the complete story of reversal with brutal clarity. In 1942, representing German advantage, 250 U-boats were operational. They sank 1,094 Allied merchant ships, lost 87 U-boats, achieving an exchange ratio of 12.6 ships per U-boat lost. Average warning time before air attack was 180 seconds, and successful crash dives occurred 89% of the time. In 1943, representing the turning point, 425 U-boats were operational. They sank only 132 Allied merchant ships, lost 344 U-boats, achieving an exchange ratio of 0. 38 ships per U-boat lost, average warning time before air attack dropped to 5 seconds, and successful crash dives occurred only 15% of the time. Of 1,162 U-boats commissioned during the entire war, 785 were destroyed, representing a loss rate of 67.5%. Aircraft accounted for 250 of these losses directly, with another 100 attributed to combined air and surface attacks. The human cost was staggering beyond comprehension. Of the 40,000 men who served in U-boats, 28,000 died at sea, a 70% casualty rate that exceeded any other service in any nation during the war. Herbert Werner, who survived 5 different U-boats and later wrote the memoir Iron Coffins, described the evolution from confident hunters to hunted prey in terms that captured the psychological transformation. We measured our lives in seconds, the seconds between detection and death. Those seconds were everything to us, and then they were nothing. Werner survived the war as one of only 7,000 men from the original 40,000 who served. His memoir captured the psychological toll that lasted decades after the war ended. Years later, he still suffered nightmares, shouting alarm in his sleep, forever crash diving in his dreams, unable to escape the trauma of those desperate seconds. Dr. Paul Faffinger, who saved U-441 after the July 12, 1943 attack by assuming emergency command and navigating the crippled submarine back to port, became a respected physician in Hamburg after the war. In a 1976 interview, he reflected on that day with the clarity that only time provides. I saved more lives in those 31 hours getting the boat home than in my entire medical career before or after. We had perhaps 5 seconds of warning when those bow fighters attacked, 5 seconds between life and death, and somehow we survived when so many others did not. At a 1985 reunion of U-boat veterans in Munich, survivors gathered to discuss their experiences with the candor that only fellow veterans could truly understand. Reinhard Hardigan, who had commanded U-123 during highly successful operations off the American coast in early 1942, reflected on the transformation with bitter hindsight. We went from being hunters to hunted in a matter of months. The technology that had protected us and given us the ability to disappear in seconds was taken away by enemy innovations we couldn't counter. When those seconds were gone, we were simply targets waiting to be destroyed. The U-boat experience offers critical lessons for contemporary warfare that military planners continue to study. Current military systems depend on technological margins as narrow as those crucial seconds that meant life or death for submarine crews. The lesson remains constant across decades. Technological advantages are temporary. Any system dependent on a narrow time margin for survival is inherently vulnerable to disruption, and the advantage provided exists only until an effective counter is developed. Military academies study the U-boat collapse as a textbook case study in technological disruption and the danger of assuming current advantages will persist. Today's stealth aircraft, cyber weapons, and submarine systems all face the same fundamental vulnerability that destroyed the U-boat force. The advantage they provide exists in a precarious balance that can be upset by a single breakthrough in detection or countermeasures. The last Type 7 U-boat, U-995, sits as a memorial at the Lebeau Naval Memorial near Kiel, Germany. Visitors can walk through the cramped compartments where men once counted seconds between life and death, experiencing firsthand just how confined and claustrophobic these iron coffins truly were. A plaque near the conning tower reads simply, "In memory of the 28,000 German submariners who perished at sea, a stark reminder of the cost." The story of the German U-boat's crash dive window represents one of history's clearest examples of technology determining warfare's outcome with mathematical precision. Between 1942 and 1943, Allied innovations compressed German reaction time from comfortable minutes to desperate seconds to nothing at all. When centimetric radar eliminated warning entirely in March 1943, the U-boat force ceased to exist as an effective weapon, reduced to a force that could barely survive, let alone attack successfully. The human stories within this technological revolution illuminate the true cost of modern warfare in ways that statistics alone cannot capture. Dr. Paul Faffinger, navigating a shattered submarine home after assuming emergency command with no training, crews manning anti-aircraft guns while knowing they couldn't possibly win the fight, the mutual destruction of U-571 and its attacker locked in a death embrace. These moments reveal how technology transformed individual courage into statistical inevitability. The strategic implications extended far beyond individual encounters in the Atlantic. When the escape window closed permanently, it took with it Germany's only realistic hope of strangling Allied supply lines and forcing Britain to negotiate. The Battle of the Atlantic, which Churchill identified as the dominating factor throughout the war, was decided not by seamanship or courage or determination, but by the ruthless compression of time through technological advancement. The U-boats entered the war with what seemed like a reliable escape mechanism, the crash dive that could save them from aerial attack and allow them to fight another day. This tactical advantage shaped German naval strategy for years, enabling wolf-pack tactics that nearly brought Britain to starvation by 1942. But the same scientific progress that had given submarines their underwater refuge took it away through radar innovations, sonar buoys, and acoustic torpedoes that hunted submarines beneath the waves. For the men who lived through this technological revolution, those disappearing seconds defined absolutely everything about their daily existence. They had trusted their lives to a narrow margin of time and watched that margin vanish before their eyes. In 1942, they had minutes of warning before aircraft arrived. By mid-1943, they had seconds. By 1944, they had nothing at all, operating blind against an enemy that could see them from beyond the horizon. The Battle of the Atlantic was won in laboratories and factories as much as on the ocean, perhaps even more so. British scientists who developed centimetric radar in secret facilities, American workers who built thousands of patrol aircraft in factories running around the clock, Allied intelligence officers who broke German codes through brilliant cryptanalysis, they collectively eliminated the U-boat's escape window through sustained technological effort. Their victory was methodical rather than dramatic, technological rather than heroic, yet utterly decisive in its impact. Yet within this technological struggle, elements of humanity persisted despite the mechanized slaughter. American air crews dropping life rafts to German survivors floating in the Atlantic, U-boat crews remaining at their posts despite overwhelming odds and certain death, the mutual respect that sometimes developed between enemies who understood each other's courage, these glimpses of human dignity amid mechanized warfare, remind us that even technological combat cannot completely dehumanize the men who fight. The U-boat force that entered the war as Germany's elite naval unit, confident in their ability to disappear beneath the waves whenever danger threatened, ended it as a shattered remnant of its former self. Of the young men who sailed from French ports singing songs of certain victory over England, 7 in 10 would never return to see their homeland again. They died because technology stole the seconds they desperately needed to survive, compressing their margin of safety until it vanished completely. Modern nuclear submarines never surface during operations, making the crash dive completely obsolete as a tactical maneuver. Yet they face their own technological vulnerabilities in the form of satellite surveillance systems, underwater sensor networks, and autonomous vehicles that may one day compress their survival margins just as radar and aircraft compressed those of their diesel-powered predecessors. The ghosts of U-boat crews who died believing they had seconds to spare serve as eternal warnings to all who place blind faith in technological advantages without considering how quickly those advantages can be lost. In the brutal arithmetic of technological warfare, yesterday's comfortable safety margin becomes today's critical vulnerability, and today's decisive advantage becomes tomorrow's fatal weakness almost overnight. The final irony remains stark and undeniable. The most successful submarine force in history up to that point was destroyed not by superior seamanship or greater courage or better training, but by the elimination of less than 1 minute of warning time. Seconds counted desperately by lookouts straining their eyes, measured precisely by engineers calculating dive times, lost irrevocably to technological innovations they couldn't detect or counter, determined the fate of nations and the outcome of the longest campaign of World War II. The story of the 45-second crash dive reminds us that in warfare as in life, nothing remains permanent except change itself and the relentless march of technological progress. The German submarine force learned this lesson at terrible cost, measured in 28,000 lives lost when their margin of safety compressed from comfortable minutes to desperate seconds to nothing at all. Their sacrifice stands as eternal testament to a fundamental truth that echoes across the decades. In the unforgiving realm of military technology, the seconds you count on today to keep you alive will not save you tomorrow when the enemy develops the counter you never saw coming.